Why we break and how we heal. There is a moment in every human life when something breaks. Sometimes it is sudden, like glass shattering on a cold floor. Sometimes it is slow, almost invisible, like a hairline fracture spreading quietly through stone. And sometimes the breaking is not seen at all, because it happens inside. A rupture of trust, a collapse of certainty, a soft, aching unraveling of who we thought we were. This story begins there, in the place where the human mind meets the weight of being alive, where biology collides with emotion, where memory meets meaning, where the ancient architecture of the nervous system carries the modern pressures of the world, where every person, no matter how strong or composed or resilient they appear, encounters the same fundamental truth. To be human is to be breakable. Take a moment and notice your breath. Noticing it does not mean changing it, just allowing it to rise and fall in its own rhythm, as if you are watching a tide roll in and roll out. This gentle awareness can make room for the story we are about to explore. A story about all of us. From the earliest moments of our existence, our species has been shaped by fragility. We are born prematurely compared to almost every other mammal, arriving into the world soft, undefended, utterly dependent on care. Our minds develop slowly, absorbing impressions and patterns long before we have the ability to understand them. Our nervous systems remain sensitive, tuned by evolution to detect danger, to react quickly, to survive. And yet, this same sensitivity gives us the remarkable ability to feel deeply, to imagine, to empathize, to create meaning. We are both powerful and vulnerable, enduring and delicate, designed for survival but also for connection. As societies grew, as language evolved, as memory deepened and culture expanded, we developed something extraordinary. The sense of self, the ability to look inward and recognize our own inner world. And with that came the capacity for suffering that is uniquely human. Not just physical pain, but emotional wounds, psychological fractures, existential questions that echo through the mind. The burden of remembering, the ache of longing, the weight of identity, the fear of loss, the hope for belonging. In the long arc of human history, breaking has been part of the design. Not a flaw, not a failure, but a signal, a message from the body, the mind, or the spirit that something needs attention, care, or change. Breaking is often the beginning of transformation, a moment that opens a doorway to growth, understanding, or healing that could not have occurred without the fracture. Gently softening the shoulders can help ease tension that builds without us noticing. There is no need to force anything. Just letting them drop a little, letting the breath flow a little more freely. Healing always begins with space. A small opening, a touch of awareness. Throughout this journey, we will explore why we break. The pressures, the histories, the invisible threads that shape human vulnerability. We will look at stress, trauma, shame, emotional wounds, and the ways the nervous system tries to protect us. We will wander through childhood, memory, culture, and ancient traditions. We will explore attachment, connection, and the shaping of the self. And we will enter the profound territory of healing. Neuroplasticity, emotional integration, community, meaning-making, and the slow, steady rebirth of a stronger, more whole self. This is not a story of perfection or invincibility. It is a story of resilience, of how the human mind can bend, crack, and sometimes collapse, but also repair, rewire, and rise again. It is a story of science and soul, of biology and philosophy, of ancient instinct and modern insight. A story told with gentleness, depth, and the quiet recognition that everyone listening has carried pain. Everyone has broken in some way, and everyone can heal. As we begin, allow one more slow breath, noticing the cool air entering, the warmer air leaving. A small reminder that you are here, present, capable of witnessing this journey from a place of safety. Let us step into the first chapter, into the tender architecture of the human mind, into the place where vulnerability begins. The vulnerable mind. The human mind is a cathedral of astonishing complexity and quiet fragility. It is built from billions of neurons, each connected to thousands of others, forming a living constellation of electrical rhythms and chemical signals. Every thought you have ever had, every memory, every worry, every breakthrough, every hope, every shadow, all of it arises from this intricate network of cells. And yet, for all its brilliance, the mind is delicate, easily shaped, easily overwhelmed, easily wounded. To understand why we break, we must first understand the biological and psychological landscape we inhabit from the moment we are born. Our species is unique in many ways, but one characteristic stands out sharply. We arrive in the world unfinished. Unlike many animals that stand on their legs within hours or navigate the world easily in days, humans are profoundly premature at birth. The brain is not fully developed. The nervous system is not fully calibrated. Our earliest experiences, being held, touched, comforted, spoken to, literally sculpt the architecture of the brain. This early wiring is not optional. It is foundational. Even now, as you listen, you carry within you the echoes of those first years of life. The way you respond to stress, the way you attach to others, the way you process emotion, the way you interpret danger. All of this began as early programming, laid down before you fully understood the world you were entering. Take a moment to observe a single breath. Feel its movement without trying to guide it. This small pause is a gentle reminder that even awareness, the most fragile and remarkable feature of human consciousness, is something that grows, expands, and stabilizes over time. The mind evolved in an environment utterly different from the one we live in today. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived in tight tribes, surrounded by a relatively predictable natural world. Their threats were physical predators, hunger, danger from rival groups, natural disasters. Their social networks were small, intimate, and interdependent. Emotions were regulated collectively. Trauma was metabolized communally. Safety was woven into relationships. Contrast that with modern life. Today, we live in vast societies, surrounded by artificial noise, endless information, relentless comparison, and expectations that exceed the capacity of our ancient nervous systems. We face pressure, not from predators hiding in tall grass, but from workloads, financial strain, social isolation, digital overstimulation, and the complexities of modern identity. We are biologically ancient beings, navigating a world that evolved far faster than we did, creating an ongoing mismatch between what our brain can handle and what it confronts daily. This mismatch is one of the reasons why the human mind is so vulnerable. We were not designed for constant exposure to stress. We were not designed to process thousands of social signals a day. We were not designed to evaluate ourselves against curated images, relentless achievements, or societal ideals. Our minds break in part because the world we inhabit pushes on the limits of our nervous system in ways it was never prepared for. But there is something deeper, a more profound layer to our vulnerability. It lies in the very essence of consciousness itself. Self-awareness, introspection, the ability to reflect on the past and imagine the future. These traits gave our species extraordinary gifts: creativity, collaboration, storytelling, planning, meaning-making. But they also opened the door to emotional pain that is uniquely human. We can grieve the future before it happens. We can replay the past long after it ends. We can form an identity and then fear its loss. We can create beliefs and then feel shattered when they are challenged. We can imagine possibilities and then feel crushed when life does not unfold as we hoped. The human mind is vulnerable precisely because it is capable of so much. Allow your shoulders to soften for a moment. No pressure. Just letting go of a tiny amount of tension, as if giving the body permission to be here without effort. This kind of gentle awareness mirrors the kind of care the mind often needs, but rarely receives. Emotionally, we are shaped by connection. The brain depends on others for regulation throughout life, not only in childhood. Even as adults, a comforting voice, a steady presence, a supportive friend, or a loving partner can shift the physiology of the nervous system. Our minds are interdependent. We are never meant to manage everything alone. This is another reason for vulnerability. The mind expects connection as part of its normal functioning. When connection is absent, disrupted, unsafe, or inconsistent, the architecture of emotional regulation begins to strain. Isolation, rejection, abandonment. These are not minor experiences. They activate the same neural networks involved in physical pain. Loneliness is processed in many of the same regions that interpret injury. The mind registers social disconnection as an existential threat because for most of our history, it was one. And yet, modern life often pulls us away from community. People live alone. They move frequently. They build relationships through screens. They compare themselves to others constantly. They hide their struggles because vulnerability feels dangerous in a culture that prizes independence and perfection. The result is a mind constantly negotiating between ancient needs and modern realities, often without enough support to hold itself together. When we break, it is rarely from one moment alone. It is usually from accumulated pressure, unprocessed emotion, unmet needs, unresolved memories, or overwhelming stress. A gradual overload that the mind tries to manage until it can no longer carry the weight. The breaking is not weakness. It is a threshold, a signal that the system requires protection, rest, reorganization, or healing. Take another gentle breath. Feel the air travel in and expand slightly, then leave the body without effort. These small pauses remind us that awareness itself can be a refuge when the mind feels fragile. Our vulnerability is not a flaw. It is the foundation of our complexity. The same sensitivity that makes us breakable also makes us capable of love, empathy, art, imagination, and wisdom. The mind that fractures is also the mind that transforms. To understand how pressure becomes overload, how vulnerability becomes breaking, and how breaking becomes the beginning of healing, we move now into the next chapter, into the terrain where biology strains under the demands of life, into the story of stress, into the quiet, relentless force that shapes the body and mind more deeply than we realize. Stress and overload. Stress is one of the oldest forces in the human story, older than civilization, older than language, older than memory itself. It is woven into the biology of every creature that has ever survived long enough to reproduce. And yet, for humans, stress is not merely a biological reflex. It has become a psychological weight, a cultural phenomenon, and one of the primary ways the modern world breaks us. To understand why, we must begin with the nervous system. A system built for survival, honed by millions of years of evolution, and designed not for comfort or happiness, but for staying alive. When we speak about stress, we often imagine it as an emotion worry, tension, overwhelm. But stress is first and foremost a physiological shift, a full body mobilization of resources to respond to threat. In the ancient world, these threats were clear: a predator, a rival, a sudden storm, a dangerous cliff, a scarcity of food. The stress response prepared the body to run, fight, freeze, or find safety. It was fast, efficient, life-saving. Today, the threats are different. Emails, deadlines, financial uncertainty, social judgment, excessive noise, traffic, notifications, arguments, loneliness, self-comparison, the pressure of having to be everything, everywhere, all at once. But the nervous system reacts to these modern stressors as if they were ancient dangers. The same cascade of hormones, the same burst of adrenaline, the same spike of cortisol, the same tightening of muscle, narrowing of attention, and quickening of breath. Take a moment to notice your breathing again. Feel whether it is fast or slow, deep or shallow. This is not about changing it, only about becoming aware of how the body responds to the world. The stress response itself is not harmful. It is essential. What harms us is chronic activation, when the system that evolved for brief moments of survival becomes engaged for hours, days, months, or even years. Living in a state of ongoing stress is like running the engine of a car at maximum speed, long after the danger has passed. Something begins to wear down. Something begins to crack. In moments of acute stress, the body shuts down anything that is not immediately necessary for survival. Digestion slows. Immune function decreases. Long-term planning fades. Creativity dims. Compassion becomes harder to access. The mind becomes narrow, focused on the source of threat, scanning for danger, interpreting everything through the lens of survival. When this state becomes chronic, the effects spread into every part of life. Not just physically, but emotionally. People become more irritable, more reactive, more anxious, more withdrawn, more self-critical. The brain changes shape. The amygdala, responsible for detecting threat, grows more active. The hippocampus, responsible for memory and contextual understanding, can shrink under prolonged cortisol exposure. The prefrontal cortex, which governs decision-making, emotional regulation, and insight, becomes less effective. Stress, in this way, is not only about the demands placed upon us. It is about how these demands interfere with our ability to think, feel, connect, and rest. When the body is in survival mode, the mind is no longer free. Our ancestors had natural cycles built into life: periods of stress, followed by periods of rest. A hunt followed by a feast, a storm followed by calm, a conflict resolved through community ritual. Today, those cycles are broken. We are rarely fully resting. Even in moments of stillness, the mind often continues to spin. Worry becomes background noise. To-do lists linger. Potential threats exist everywhere, even in imagination. Let your shoulders lower again. If they feel tense, let gravity hold them. Small gestures like this create micro moments of rest in a world of constant activation. Modern life pushes us toward a threshold that the nervous system was not built to cross. And when we cross it, when stress accumulates faster than we can process it, we reach the territory of overload, a place where everything feels too much. where clarity fades, where the simplest tasks feel monumental, where the mind begins to shut down, not because it is weak, but because it is protecting itself from further harm. Overload manifests in many ways: forgetfulness, fatigue, trouble sleeping, emotional numbness, unexplained aches, irritability, difficulty focusing, a sense of being disconnected, a loss of joy in things that once felt meaningful. This is the early edge of breaking, a place where stress transitions from being adaptive to being damaging, where the nervous system shifts from responding to threat to being overwhelmed by it. But overload is not simply neurological. It is psychological. It is emotional. It is existential. One of the greatest sources of stress for humans is the conflict between who we are and who we believe we should be. The gap shaped by culture, family, expectation, and internalized standards. When we feel we are not enough, not successful enough, not stable enough, not strong enough, not perfect enough, the stress is not external, it comes from within. The mind begins to fracture under the weight of self-judgment. Humans are the only species that can shame themselves for suffering. The only species that can feel guilty for struggling. The only species that can look at a full emotional burden and believe they should carry it without help. This inner pressure compounds the outer stress, pushing the psyche closer to collapse. Take a long, slow breath in. Then let the exhale soften naturally. This gentle presence is the opposite of overload. It is the beginning of regulation. The nervous system has limits. The psyche has limits. When these limits are exceeded, the cracks begin to show. Thoughts become heavy. Feelings become intense or distant. The body becomes exhausted or restless. The self begins to feel unfamiliar. And then something breaks. Not all at once, but gradually. Like a dam under too much pressure. This breaking is not failure. It is a signal. A message from the body and mind that something must change. That the system has reached its threshold. In the next chapter, we explore what happens when the cracks deepen. When the inner world begins to fracture. When emotion becomes too heavy to hold. When we reach that quiet, painful place inside where breaking becomes undeniable. Emotional fracture. There is a moment, sometimes subtle and sometimes thunderous, when something inside us shifts. A moment when the emotional world, once coherent, once navigable, begins to come apart. This is the experience of emotional fracture. Not just stress, not just sadness, but a deeper kind of breaking. A rupture within the inner landscape that changes the way we feel, think, and relate to the world. Emotional fracture can begin with an event, a loss, a betrayal, a heartbreak, a conflict, a disappointment that cuts deeper than expected. But often, it evolves more quietly. When too many emotions have gone unspoken, when too many needs have gone unmet, when too many pressures have been endured while pretending everything is fine. To understand this fracture, imagine the emotional mind as a series of rivers. Each emotion a current running through us. Joy flows lightly, weaving through memory and experience. Sadness moves more slowly, pooling in deeper places. Fear runs fast, sharp, alert. Anger rises with heat, carving channels of intensity through the body. These rivers are meant to move. Emotion is dynamic, fluid, alive. But when stress is chronic, when wounds accumulate, or when the inner world feels unsafe, the rivers begin to overflow, or dry out, or collide, and the landscape of the psyche begins to shift. Take a breath and feel the rise and fall. Let the exhale soften. This calm observation mirrors the gentle awareness needed to understand emotion without being consumed by it. Emotional fracture often begins with overwhelm. A sense that the world inside is louder than the world outside. Thoughts become tangled. Feelings become intense or confusing. The boundaries between emotions blur, making it difficult to know what we feel or why. We may swing between states, sadness to anger, numbness to fear, restlessness to exhaustion, as if the mind is searching for solid ground and finding none. The fracture deepens when a single emotion becomes too heavy to hold. Grief may feel like a weight pressing on the chest. Anxiety, like an electric current beneath the skin. Shame like a shadow that darkens the sense of self. Hopelessness like a fading of light inside the mind. This heaviness does not simply sit within us. It changes us. Emotion affects cognition. Strong emotions shrink the field of perception. They shape how we interpret the world. When the inner world fractures, the outer world feels distorted. We might begin to believe we are alone in our struggle. We might feel unworthy of care. We might see threat in places where none exists. We might misinterpret others' intentions. We might feel disconnected from the parts of ourselves that once felt steady or familiar. This is not weakness. It is the nervous system in survival mode. Emotion becomes amplified when the brain believes we are in danger. And emotional fractures often form in the mind's attempt to protect itself. Consider how children respond when overwhelmed. They cry. They seek comfort. They express distress openly. But adults often feel they must manage emotion privately. They silence it, push it down, hide it, deny it. And in doing so, the pressure builds internally. The fracture moves beneath the surface. Gently relax the jaw if you can. So much tension hides there without our awareness. When the inner world becomes too painful, the mind begins to split the experience into parts. This is not a disorder. This is a universal human process. One part may feel despair. Another part may feel numb. Another may try to keep functioning. Another may try to protect by shutting down emotion entirely. These inner parts evolved from the instinct to survive. When pain becomes overwhelming, the psyche creates internal divisions to hold what cannot be held as a whole. Emotional fracture can look like many things. Difficulty making decisions. Feeling disconnected from oneself or others. A sudden loss of interest in what once mattered. A sense of emptiness or unreality. Being easily startled or overwhelmed. A feeling that everything is too much or nothing matters at all. The world may look unchanged, but feel fundamentally different. Colors less vibrant. Music less moving. Time either dragging or racing. Life continuing around you while you feel paused or suspended inside your own mind. When the fracture deepens, people often begin to fear their own emotions. Fear that sadness will be too heavy. Fear that anger will be too much. Fear that grief will never end. Fear that vulnerability will be met with rejection. Fear that the self is unraveling. This fear intensifies the fracture. It creates a feedback loop. Emotion overwhelm. Fear of emotion. Greater overwhelm. And the system becomes locked in a cycle of emotional turbulence. Take a slow breath in. Let it fall out gently. These small moments of awareness help the mind step outside the loop, even if only for a moment. But emotional fracture is not only about what overwhelms us. It is also about what is missing. Missing support. Missing understanding. Missing connection. Missing safety. Missing someone to say, I see you. You are not alone in this. We break partly because we are wired to heal in connection. When connection is absent, the burden becomes too heavy. Yet, even in emotional fracture, something remains unbroken. The capacity to feel. The capacity to adapt. The capacity to heal. The capacity to be moved by truth, by care, by meaning, by love. The fracture itself becomes the pathway through which light enters, the entry point for transformation. To understand what shapes the inner world so deeply, what makes some emotions so heavy, and why we carry wounds long into adulthood, we now turn to the earliest layers of human experience, the foundations of vulnerability, the first patterns etched into the young mind. The story of how early life shapes the fractures we experience later. Let us move into childhood, into the quiet beginnings of the emotional self. Childhood wounds. The story of human vulnerability begins long before we are aware of it, long before language, long before conscious memory. It begins in the soft, unguarded years of childhood, when the brain is forming at its fastest pace and the world around us is writing its script into our nervous system. These early experiences shape how we love, how we fear, how we cope, and how we break. Childhood is not simply a phase of life. It is the blueprint. Everything that comes after is influenced by those first connections, first impressions, first wounds, and first comforts. The child's mind is open, absorbent, and deeply sensitive. Every experience leaves a trace. Even now, as you breathe gently, you carry within you the psychological fingerprints of your earliest years. Not in the form of explicit memories, but in patterns. Patterns of emotion. Patterns of thought. Patterns of expectation. Patterns of relationship. These patterns become the unconscious compass that guides much of adult life. Take a soft breath in and let it out naturally. This simple awareness mirrors the clarity we need to explore this chapter with compassion. In the earliest days of life, the brain is wiring itself around three core questions. Am I safe? Am I loved? Do my needs matter? These questions are not asked in words. They are asked through experience. When a caregiver responds with warmth, presence, and consistency, the child's brain forms pathways that say, yes, the world is safe, I am cared for, my needs belong. When care is inconsistent, chaotic, distant, or frightening, different pathways form. Pathways that say, stay alert, stay small, stay quiet, stay strong, stay hidden. These early responses become the architecture of attachment, the deep emotional blueprint that determines how we connect to others. Attachment is not just about bonding. It is about survival. A child cannot regulate their own nervous system. Their heart rate, stress hormones, emotional intensity, and sense of safety are all regulated through the caregiver, through eye contact, tone of voice, facial expression, touch, presence. When this co-regulation is stable, the child internalizes a sense of security. And this security becomes the foundation for resilience. But when co-regulation is disrupted, the child learns to adapt in whatever way ensures survival. This is where childhood wounds begin. Some wounds are obvious: neglect, abuse, conflict, loss, chaos, fear. But many wounds are subtle. A caregiver who is present but emotionally distant. A parent who is loving but unpredictable. A family that values achievement more than expression. A culture that teaches children to hide emotion, suppress need, or earn worthiness through perfection. These experiences do not create scars on the surface. They create templates deep within the developmental brain. Relax your shoulders for a moment. letting tension drift downward. This kind of gentle softening mirrors what children needed long before they could ask for it. One of the most important truths in developmental psychology is this: children do not experience events. They experience interpretations. A raised voice, an argument, a withdrawn parent. These events may seem small to adults, but for a child without context, without autonomy, without emotional language, they can become overwhelming. The child's brain does not say, "My parent is stressed from work." It says, "Ani caused this," or "I am not wanted," or "I am unsafe." Because children personalize everything. This is not immaturity. It is evolutionary design. A child must believe they have control, because believing they are powerless would be too dangerous. So the mind bends reality to preserve safety. But these bends in perception become the frameworks of adult identity. A child who grows up without consistent affection may learn to stop seeking it. A child who grows up with unpredictable care may learn hypervigilance, always scanning for cues, anticipating danger. A child who grows up with criticism may internalize a harsh inner voice. A child who grows up feeling unseen may learn to become invisible. A child who grows up having to comfort their parent may learn to neglect their own needs. A child who grows up in chaos may confuse intensity with love. A child who grows up in silence may learn to silence themselves. These adaptations once protected the young mind, but in adulthood, they become the source of struggle. This is the paradox of childhood wounds. They are formed in the service of survival, yet later they become the structures through which we suffer. Consider the child who learns to be hyper-independent because there was no one reliable to turn to. As an adult, this person may struggle to ask for help, believing vulnerability is dangerous. Or the child who learned to anticipate others' emotions to stay safe. In adulthood, this becomes people-pleasing, self-abandonment, emotional exhaustion, or the child who grew up holding everything inside. As an adult, emotions may feel overwhelming, unfamiliar, or frightening. Take another soft breath. These reflections can stir emotion. Awareness is not meant to judge the past, but to understand it. Memory plays a complex role here. Explicit memories may fade, but implicit memories, the emotional and physiological imprints from early life remain. They appear not as stories, but as reactions. Why do certain tones of voice feel threatening? Why does conflict feel terrifying or addictive? Why is comfort difficult to receive? Why does love feel uncertain? Why does loneliness feel familiar? These responses are less about the present and more about the echoes of childhood. The nervous system carries these echoes into adulthood, shaping relationships, shaping self-worth, shaping emotion. This is why adult relationships are often the stage where childhood wounds reappear. Not because we are broken, but because the mind seeks to complete patterns it did not understand fully as a child. The partner who withdraws triggers the wound of abandonment. The partner who becomes angry triggers the wound of fear. The partner who becomes distant triggers the wound of invisibility. And without awareness, we react with the same strategies we learned long ago, shutting down, clinging, becoming angry, becoming numb, apologizing excessively, or disappearing emotionally. Yet, within each wound is a hidden truth. Every childhood adaptation was an attempt to preserve the self. Every survival strategy was intelligence. Every emotional scar was a shield. The child inside was doing everything possible to stay safe. Take a slow inhale, then release it gently. This breath is an act of compassion toward the history you carry. Childhood wounds, explain why we break more easily in adulthood than we often expect. They are not signs of weakness. They are reminders of what was once too much for a young mind to hold. But these wounds do not define us permanently. The brain remains plastic. The psyche remains adaptive. Healing remains possible. And in many cases, the deepest wounds become the deepest sources of strength when integrated. To understand how these early wounds transform into adult trauma, and how trauma shapes memory, emotion, and the body, we now move into the biological realm, into the nervous system, into the circuitry of survival, into the chapter where breaking becomes not just emotional, but physiological. The biology of trauma. Trauma is not just an event. It is a transformation. It is what happens inside the body, the brain, and the nervous system when something overwhelms the capacity to cope. Trauma is the imprint left behind when an experience is too intense, too sudden, too confusing, or too threatening for the mind to process fully. And it changes everything: cognition, emotion, memory, physical health, and the deeper blueprint of the self. To understand why trauma feels so powerful, we must begin with the nervous system. The human nervous system is ancient, far older than consciousness, built for survival long before language and culture existed. Its primary task is simple: keep you alive, not necessarily comfortable, not necessarily calm, just alive. Take a slow breath and let it fall naturally. This softening allows space to explore what the body holds. Trauma occurs when the nervous system perceives danger that exceeds its ability to respond. This danger might be physical, a violent event, a sudden accident, or emotional betrayal, abandonment, humiliation, neglect, or relational attachment ruptures, childhood overwhelm, threats to belonging. But to the nervous system, emotional and relational threats can be as significant as physical ones. Because for most of our species' history, losing connection meant losing survival. The biology of trauma unfolds in stages, each one shaped by an ancient survival reflex. Fight. A surge of adrenaline. Muscles ready. Heart quickening. The body preparing to confront the threat. Flight. The urge to run. Escape. Flee the danger with whatever strength remains. Freeze. Stillness. Immobilization. The body becoming quiet, almost absent, when neither fight nor flight seems possible. Fawn. Appease. Comply. Seek safety through pleasing or pacifying the perceived threat. These responses are not choices. They are reflexes, rapid, automatic patterns encoded in the brainstem, far below conscious control. They activate within milliseconds, shaping perception, thought, and action. In trauma, these reflexes become stuck, not because the threat continues, but because the nervous system cannot complete the cycle of activation and return to safety. Energy mobilized for survival remains trapped inside. The body remembers what the mind cannot fully articulate. Expert trauma researchers often say, what the mind avoids, the body stores. And it is true. Trauma is held in muscle tension, in posture, in breath, in sleep patterns, in emotional reactions, in startle responses, in the rhythm of the heart itself. Take a gentle breath in and let it soften. This awareness is the beginning of understanding the body's language. A key structure in trauma is the amygdala, the brain's alarm system. When trauma occurs, the amygdala becomes hypersensitive. It begins to interpret neutral events as dangerous, subtle cues as threats, and uncertainty as risk. This is not overreaction. It is adaptation. The brain is trying to protect you, even if it feels irrational. Meanwhile, the hippocampus, the region responsible for forming coherent memories, becomes overwhelmed. Traumatic memories may be stored in fragments, sensations, images, or emotional impressions rather than as a clear narrative. This explains flashbacks. Why certain sounds, smells, or expressions can trigger intense emotion. Why trauma feels like it's happening now instead of it happened then. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for reasoning, reflection, emotional regulation, becomes less active during trauma. It is not designed to think clearly under threat. This is why people in traumatic situations may feel numb, confused, disconnected, or unable to speak. Together, these changes create a kind of storm inside the brain. A storm that can continue long after the event has passed. Trauma is not the memory of what happened. Trauma is the residue, the imprint, the unresolved response. Even after the danger is gone, the nervous system may remain on high alert. The body may continue to brace, contract, prepare, as if the threat is still present or could return at any moment. This state is exhausting, physically, emotionally, mentally. It reshapes how a person sees themselves and the world. Trust becomes fragile. Safety feels elusive. Relationships feel complicated. And the sense of identity can fracture under the weight of survival mode thinking. Take a slow inhale, letting the breath expand, and a gentle exhale to let the body know it is here, in the present. Trauma changes memory in important ways. For many, the event may feel foggy, distant, or fragmented. For others, it may feel vivid, intrusive, and immediate. This variation is not about strength or weakness. It is about how the nervous system encoded the experience. When trauma is ongoing, as in childhood neglect, chronic stress, emotional abuse, or unstable environments, the brain does not register a single event. It registers a pattern, and patterns create deeper structural changes. Children in unsafe environments often have nervous systems that remain in constant readiness. This becomes the foundation of adult hypervigilance, sensitivity to rejection, emotional dysregulation, or a persistent feeling of danger, even in safe settings. Trauma also affects the vagus nerve, the main pathway that connects the brain to the heart, lungs, and gut. When trauma disrupts this system, digestion becomes irregular, breathing becomes shallow, sleep becomes disturbed, the body becomes tense. These physical symptoms are often misunderstood as unrelated, but they are deeply connected to the nervous system's perception of safety. This is why trauma feels so total. It is not just emotional. It is embodied. Every system in the body is influenced by the imprint of overwhelm. But trauma is not just about what happened. It is also about what was missing. The absence of comfort. The absence of support. The absence of someone to say, "You are safe now." Healing often requires restoring what trauma took away, not just calming the nervous system, but rebuilding the sense of connection, meaning, and self-worth that was fractured. Take another gentle breath, letting the exhale fall easily. This small act of presence mirrors the gradual shifts that healing requires. Understanding the biology of trauma helps us see that breaking is not weakness. It is biology responding to overwhelm. It is adaptation in the face of threat. It is the nervous system trying to protect what matters. But trauma also carries a shadow, a quiet, corrosive emotion that often grows from the cracks left behind. An emotion that shapes self-perception more profoundly than fear or anger. an emotion that convinces us we are broken beyond repair. To understand the next layer of breaking, we move into the realm of shame, the invisible wound beneath so much suffering, the shadow that hides in silence, the shadow of shame. Shame is one of the most powerful and least understood forces in human psychology. It is not simply embarrassment. It is not guilt. It is not regret. Shame is something deeper, something older, something that strikes at the core of identity and tells a person not just, I did something wrong, but there is something wrong with me. Shame is the emotion that makes us want to hide, to shrink, to disappear. It is the quiet belief that we are unworthy of love, belonging, or acceptance. And because it targets the core of who we are, shame does not announce itself loudly. It whispers. It lingers. It shapes the inner world like a slow, persistent erosion. Take a slow breath in and let the exhale soften. This gentle awareness can help hold the weight of this chapter with compassion. Shame begins early, before logic develops, before language forms, before we understand ourselves as separate individuals. Shame develops in the space between who we are and how others respond to us. If a child feels unseen, dismissed, punished unpredictably, or emotionally neglected, the mind does not say, "My environment is unstable." Instead, it says, "There is something wrong with me. This is not a mistake. It is survival." A child must believe they can control the situation. It is too dangerous to believe they are powerless. So the mind folds the experience inward. It becomes self-blame, a protective illusion that paradoxically becomes a long-term wound. When children receive messages, spoken or unspoken, that their emotions are too much, their needs are inconvenient, or their presence is not desired, they internalize shame. They learn to hide feelings, to mask vulnerability, to shrink parts of themselves that were never meant to be small. Shame is relational in origin, but individual in impact. It begins in the gaze of another person, but eventually becomes the gaze we turn upon ourselves. Relax the jaw slightly if it feels tight. Shame often lives there. Shame does not only form through neglect or criticism. It can also emerge from unmet expectations. Children who grow up in households where perfection is prized often learn that mistakes are threats, not opportunities. They internalize a belief that their worth is tied to performance, achievement, or ideal behavior. This type of shame is subtle but pervasive. It grows quietly beneath success, creating adults who appear confident on the outside but feel like imposters inside. Shame also emerges in cultures that value strength over vulnerability. Children raised with messages like, "Don't cry," "Be strong," or "Deal with it yourself," learn to suppress emotion. What begins as survival becomes a lifelong habit of emotional self-abandonment. And beneath that suppression, shame grows. Because to suppress something is to imply it is unacceptable. Shame is different from fear or sadness. Fear signals threat. Sadness signals loss. Shame signals disconnection from self, a rupture in the relationship between who we are and who we believe we should be. This rupture affects every domain of adult life. People with deep shame often hide their struggles, feel they are too much or not enough, lack trust in relationships, sabotage opportunities for connection, overachieve to compensate, underachieve to avoid judgment, criticize themselves relentlessly, fear rejection even in safe environments, stay in harmful relationships, push away healthy ones, avoid intimacy or overshare in search of belonging. Shame is a paradox. It makes us believe we are unworthy of care, yet it forms because care was missing. It makes us want to hide, Yet healing requires being seen. It makes us self-critical, yet the root of shame is the absence of compassion. Take a soft breath in and release it slowly. These moments of gentleness help soften the grip of self-judgment. Trauma researchers describe shame as the quiet wound. Unlike fear or anger, which are active emotions, shame is passive. It freezes the self. It makes us inwardly collapse. The body reflects this collapse, shoulders curling inward, eyes turning downward, breath becoming shallow. Shame often becomes a lens through which everything is interpreted. A mistake confirms inadequacy. A conflict confirms unlovability. A rejection confirms failure. A disappointment confirms defectiveness. This lens distorts reality, creating a self-image built from fear rather than truth. Shame also functions as a protective mechanism. If someone believes they are inherently flawed, they may not expect connection. If they do not expect connection, they may avoid risking vulnerability. If they avoid vulnerability, they may avoid the possibility of being hurt again. But the protection comes at a cost. Shame builds walls that keep out not only pain, but also love. It isolates. It silences. It suppresses the very emotions that lead to healing. Many people learn to cope with shame by disconnecting from emotion entirely. Others cope by striving, working harder, achieving more, staying constantly busy. Others shift into perfectionism, believing that flawlessness will finally make them worthy. Some turn towards substances or distractions to numb the inner critic. Some turn to anger to avoid the pain beneath it. Some withdraw from relationships. Some cling to them desperately. These coping strategies are not failures. They are adaptations. They are the ways the psyche tries to survive the pain of believing oneself unlovable. Gently soften your shoulders again. Letting tension release, even slightly, can create tiny openings where shame loses its grip. Understanding shame helps us understand why we break in ways that seem mysterious. Why certain situations feel unbearable. Why criticism feels catastrophic. Why vulnerability feels risky. Why relationships feel overwhelming. Shame is the silent architect of many adult struggles. But shame also contains a hidden doorway. Because the way shame forms through disconnection reveals the way it heals. Through reconnection, through being seen, through compassion, through understanding, through the gentle acceptance of the parts of ourselves we once had to hide. However, before healing begins, many people turn to a different form of coping. A form that numbs pain without resolving it. A form that creates temporary relief but long-term disconnection. To understand why we often avoid our own emotions, escape into behaviors, or numb ourselves in moments of overwhelm, we now move into the next chapter. Why we numb. There comes a point in the human experience when pain becomes too much to hold. Too loud. Too constant. Too overwhelming for the nervous system to process in a healthy way. When this happens, the mind does something ancient, adaptive, and deeply misunderstood. It turns down the volume. It numbs. Numbing is not a failure of will. It is not a sign of weakness. It is a survival strategy, a biological, psychological, and emotional reflex designed to protect the mind from overload. Numbing is what the psyche does when it believes that feeling is dangerous. Take a gentle breath in and let it settle softly on the exhale. This awareness can help hold what unfolds next. Humans numb for many reasons. Some numb through distraction, some through overworking, some through substances, some through dissociation, some through constant stimulation or constant productivity, some through withdrawing emotionally, some through perfectionism, some through caretaking others instead of themselves, some through intellectualizing, keeping everything in the realm of thought rather than emotion. The forms differ, but the function is the same: to avoid feeling something that once felt unbearable. Numbing begins early in life. If a child cries and is not comforted, the body will eventually stop expecting comfort. If a child expresses fear and is mocked or ignored, the mind learns to bury fear. If a child raises their voice for help and no one responds, the nervous system interprets emotional expression as futile, dangerous, or shameful. And so, the child shuts down internally. This shutdown is the beginning of emotional numbness, a quiet retreat from the inner world. In adulthood, numbness often looks like feeling disconnected from oneself, feeling distant from others, not knowing what one feels, feeling flat or empty, struggling to care about things that once mattered, looking fine on the outside but feeling blank inside, using noise, work, or screens to avoid silence, becoming restless when stillness arrives, feeling like life is happening behind glass, losing access to joy, sadness, or excitement, feeling bored even when doing things you love, feeling overwhelmed by emotion one moment and unable to feel at all the next. Many people confuse numbness with calmness, but calmness is a regulated state. Numbness is the absence of sensation. Calmness feels open, spacious, grounded. Numbness feels closed, muted, suspended. Relax your shoulders for a moment, letting gravity do the work. Even subtle shifts can help reconnect body and awareness. Numbing is deeply tied to the biology of trauma. When the nervous system becomes overwhelmed, the brain releases endogenous opioids, natural chemicals that dull pain. Note, this is why so many people feel out of body or shut down during frightening experiences. This response, called dissociation, is the freeze state in action. A last resort survival strategy. Dissociation comes in many forms. Some people lose track of time. Some feel disconnected from their surroundings. Some feel like they are watching life rather than living it. Some lose emotional sensation. Some lose physical sensation. Some become highly functional on the outside while feeling absent inside. This is not a psychological defect. It is the mind protecting itself from pain it does not yet have the resources to process. On the surface, numbness feels like nothingness. But underneath, it is full of emotion. Emotions that are frozen, held in suspension, waiting for safety. Numbing does not eliminate feeling, it compresses it. The body remembers. The nervous system remembers. The unconscious mind remembers. Numbing often arises from shame, fear, or overwhelm. If expressing emotion once felt unsafe, the psyche learns to silence emotion to avoid re-traumatization. If vulnerability once led to rejection or humiliation, the mind learns to build emotional armor. If life demanded strength before we were ready, numbness becomes the mask that helps us endure. Take another slow breath in, letting the air expand gently, then let the exhale fall. Small gestures of presence soften the edges of numbness. There are many reasons people numb in adulthood. 1. To avoid emotional overwhelm. When feelings accumulate without expression, the psyche shuts down to prevent collapse. 2. To avoid pain from the past. Old wounds resurface in new situations, and the mind protects itself by distancing from emotion. 3. To survive ongoing stress. Chronic pressure forces the nervous system into survival mode, and numbness becomes a coping tool. 4. To manage shame. Shame makes emotion feel dangerous, so the mind hides the emotional self entirely. 5. To maintain control. Feeling nothing is sometimes easier than feeling everything. 6. To stay connected. In chaotic families, becoming emotionally invisible often kept the peace. 7. To prevent vulnerability. Numbing can be a way of avoiding hurt by avoiding closeness. Over time, numbness creates a paradox. It protects us from suffering, but it also protects us from joy. It shields us from pain, but it also shields us from connection. It makes the world safer, but also smaller. Life becomes muted. The full spectrum of human experience becomes compressed into grayscale. And yet, numbness should never be met with judgment. Numbness is the mind doing exactly what it was designed to do. Protect when overwhelmed. Shut down when danger feels too great. Wait until safety returns. Gently relax your jaw if you can. Emotional tension often lives there without awareness. The tragedy of numbness is not that it exists, but that people often blame themselves for it. They believe they are cold, or unfeeling, or broken. But numbness is not a flaw. It is a signal, a message that the system needs rest, safety, connection, gentleness. And this is where the path of healing becomes clearer. Because the opposite of numbness is not intensity, not emotional overwhelm, not dramatic expression. The opposite of numbness is connection. Connection to self, connection to others, connection to meaning, connection to the present moment. To heal numbness, the emotional self must be welcomed back slowly, softly, with safety, with warmth, with patience. And this healing almost always happens in the presence of others. Because what was wounded in relationship is often repaired in relationship. To understand the next stage of this journey, how connection restores what isolation breaks, we now move into the heart of human healing, into the realm of community, attachment, co-regulation, belonging, community and connection. Human beings are not built to live alone, not emotionally, not psychologically, not biologically. We are a species designed for connection, wired to feel safe in the presence of others, shaped by relationships, regulated by touch, voice, and shared experience. When connection is strong, the mind thrives. When connection is fragile, the mind suffers. When connection is broken, the mind breaks with it. To understand why community is so central to healing, we must look at the deepest truth of human evolution. For almost all of history, survival depended on belonging to a group, a tribe, a family, a circle of others who shared risk, nurtured children, hunted, gathered, and protected one another. In this ancient world, loneliness was not an emotion. It was a threat, a warning signal, a biological alarm telling the nervous system that something essential was missing. Take a slow breath in, letting it rise gently, and allow the exhale to fall. This awareness reflects the soothing rhythm the body naturally finds in connection. Connection shapes the earliest moments of life. A newborn's heart rate stabilizes in the presence of a caregiver. A baby's breath synchronizes with the breath of the one holding them. A child's brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, when comforted, touched, or spoken to gently. Before a child understands the world, they understand connection. They understand warmth. They understand presence. These early experiences create the nervous system's baseline. Connection becomes the foundation of emotional regulation. It becomes the template for how we love, how we trust, how we bond, how we cope, how we believe we deserve to be treated. When connection is safe, the inner world becomes stable. When connection is disrupted, neglected, or frightening, the inner world becomes unpredictable. As adults, this need for connection doesn't disappear. It simply becomes quieter, more disguised. We may not cry when we feel lonely, but the body still registers the absence. The nervous system still responds. The heart still aches. The mind still searches for belonging. Connection regulates the nervous system in powerful ways. A soothing tone can calm the amygdala. A compassionate presence can lower cortisol. Eye contact with someone safe can slow the heart rate. A warm touch can activate the release of oxytocin, reducing fear and increasing trust. Shared laughter releases endorphins. Shared sorrow releases tension. Co-regulation. The process by which two nervous systems influence one another is not poetic metaphor. It is physiology. Relax your shoulders gently. Let gravity hold them. This small release mirrors the settling effect of safe connection. But what happens when connection is missing? What happens when isolation becomes chronic? When support is scarce? When relationships become sources of stress instead of safety? The mind begins to fragment. Loneliness becomes a silent stressor. The nervous system moves into hypervigilance, scanning for threat. Emotions become harder to manage. The body grows tense. Thoughts become self-critical. Sleep becomes restless. Energy becomes scarce. The world begins to feel heavier. Isolation does not simply remove connection. It removes regulation. It removes the relational scaffolding that helps the mind stay balanced. This is why healing often feels impossible when attempted alone. Not because we are incapable, but because we are not meant to heal in isolation. Connection restores what trauma removes. It provides safety where fear once lived. It provides presence where absence once hurt. It provides understanding where shame once grew. It provides regulation where overwhelm once dominated. Healing relationships can take many forms. A friend who listens without judgment. A therapist who offers a compassionate, steady presence. A partner who responds with patience instead of defensiveness. A community that accepts you as you are. A mentor who sees your potential. A support group where others understand your experience. Even a single person who says, "You are not alone," can shift the entire healing trajectory. Take a breath, feeling the soft rise of the inhale, the gentle descent of the exhale. This is the sensation of being with even in stillness. Connection also allows the mind to rewrite old patterns. If someone grew up feeling unseen, being seen now begins to heal that wound. If someone grew up feeling unsafe, experiencing safety now reshapes the nervous system. If someone learned to hide emotion, having it welcomed now creates new possibilities. If someone learned they were unworthy, being accepted now challenges that belief. The brain is beautifully adaptable. Neuroplasticity responds to connection. New relational experiences create new neural pathways. They transform the internal models of self and others. They allow the psyche to reorganize around safety instead of fear. But connection does more than heal individual wounds. It creates meaning. Humans make sense of their lives through shared stories, through empathy, through witnessing and being witnessed. We heal in the reflection of others because others remind us that our inner world is real, valid, and human. Connection also helps us regulate emotion. When overwhelmed, the presence of someone calm can soothe the intensity. When numb, shared experience can awaken feeling. When ashamed, compassion can dissolve the internal critic. When grieving, companionship can carry the weight that would be unbearable alone. Relax the breath once more. Let it fall gently. This is the quiet rhythm connection restores. Community is not a luxury. It is not optional. It is the environment in which the human mind is meant to exist. When we break, we often break alone. But when we heal, we almost always heal together. To understand this process more deeply, how people turn suffering into story, and how story becomes healing, we move now into a different realm. The realm of narrative, meaning-making, identity reconstruction, the quiet transformation of pain into insight, the story of healing. Every human life is, at its core, a story. Not a perfect story, not a linear one. A story woven from emotions, memories, relationships, losses, lessons, and quiet moments that shape us more than we realize. When we break, the story fractures. When we heal, the story transforms. Healing is not only a biological process, it is a narrative process. It is the act of taking pain, raw, disordered, overwhelming, and weaving it into something that makes sense, something that can be carried, something that becomes part of a larger whole. Take a gentle breath in, letting it rise softly, and release it slowly. This kind of mindful awareness mirrors the reflective space where healing stories begin. Humans heal through meaning-making. It is one of the most remarkable features of consciousness. We do not simply experience life. We interpret it. We organize it. We create context and coherence. We take events that could shatter us, and we weave them into a greater understanding of ourselves and the world. When trauma occurs, the story breaks. The mind becomes fragmented. Memories scatter. Emotion overwhelms. Beliefs about self, others, and the future collapse. The narrative becomes unstable. Life stops making sense. Healing is the slow, gentle act of restoring coherence. Not by erasing the pain, not by pretending it didn't happen, but by integrating it, by giving it a place in the story, by allowing it to become part of the arc, not the ending. Many people believe healing means returning to who they were before the pain. But healing rarely works that way. We do not return. We become. Healing is not restoration. It is transformation. Relax your shoulders slightly, letting tension melt downward. This softening reflects the gentle acceptance required for meaning-making. There are several ways the mind begins to make meaning after suffering. 1. Understanding. Naming the experience. Learning how the nervous system responds, recognizing patterns. This shifts the narrative from "I am broken" to "I adapted." 2. Expression. Sharing the story through words, art, movement, writing, or quiet conversation allows the emotion to move and reorganize. Expression is how the fragmented elements of experience begin to reconnect. 3. Reflection. Looking back with compassion rather than judgment. Understanding the context in which pain occurred. Seeing the child we once were. Seeing the strength that carried us. 4. Connection. Telling the story to someone who listens. Being witnessed. Being understood. This is one of the most powerful healing forces in existence. 5. Integration. The ability to say, "This happened, and I am still here. This shaped me, and I am learning to grow. This pain is part of my story, not the whole of it." Take another breath and let your exhale soften naturally. This reflective space mirrors the gentle rhythm of narrative healing. The human brain is a storytelling organ. When something painful happens, the brain tries to understand it. It asks, "Why did this happen? What does it mean? What does it say about me? What does it say about the world? How do I live now? Trauma disrupts this process by creating meaning that harms. I am unsafe. I am unworthy. I am powerless. I am alone. These meanings feel true in the aftermath of pain, but they are distortions, emotional interpretations mistaken for facts. Healing rewrites these meanings with the gentler truths. I survived. I adapted. I learned. I can change. I was hurt, but I am not defined by the hurt. I deserve compassion. I deserve connection. I can create a future different from my past. When people say that healing is nonlinear, what they mean is that the story doesn't unfold neatly. Some chapters are heavy. Some are quiet. Some feel like progress. Some feel like returning to the beginning. But every moment of awareness, every breath taken consciously, every act of care, every safe connection, all of it becomes part of the narrative arc of recovery. Healing is not forgetting. It is remembering differently. It is remembering with context, with understanding, with compassion. It is remembering without drowning. The story of healing also involves confronting truths we once buried, pain we once silenced, emotions we once avoided, parts of ourselves we once hid. These elements do not return to harm us. They return to be integrated. Healing asks us to become the narrator of our story again, not the frightened child, not the overwhelmed survivor, not the silent witness, but the author, the one who can look at the past with insight and look at the future with possibility. This narrative reconstruction is not only emotional, it is biological. As we revisit memory with safety and support, the brain literally rewires. New neural pathways form. Old pathways weaken. Trauma memories shift from raw sensory fragments to coherent stories. The prefrontal cortex re-engages, calming the amygdala and reshaping emotional meaning. This is why healing never happens all at once. The brain needs time. The heart needs softness. The nervous system needs repeated experiences of safety. Gently relax your breath again, letting your exhale lengthen slightly. These micro moments of grounding mirror how the story of healing builds slowly, gently, one breath, one insight, one connection at a time. Meaning-making does not simplify pain. It dignifies it. It gives it shape. It allows the self to stand with it rather than collapse beneath it. The story of healing is the story of becoming whole again. Not by erasing what happened, but by understanding it, integrating it, and allowing it to transform us. And now, to understand how this transformation becomes physical, how the brain adapts, rewires, and renews itself, we move into the next chapter. The science of change. The biology of repair. The extraordinary capacity of the human mind to rebuild. Neuroplasticity and renewal. The human brain is not static. It is not fixed. It is not the same today as it was yesterday. It is a living, breathing, adapting organ constantly rewiring, constantly reshaping, constantly learning, even in moments of pain, especially in moments of pain. This capacity for change is called neuroplasticity, and it is one of the most hopeful truths in neuroscience. Neuroplasticity means the brain can heal. It can reorganize around new experiences. It can form new pathways. It can soften old patterns. It can release what no longer serves and strengthen what brings us forward. It can take the imprint of trauma and gradually reshape it into resilience. Take a slow breath in, letting it expand gently and release it softly. This small act of awareness mirrors the slow, persistent rhythm of neural change. For a long time, scientists believed the brain was mostly unchangeable, that once you reached adulthood, the neural structure was set. But this was a mistake. We now know the brain remains plastic from infancy to old age. It changes in response to experience, environment, emotion, and attention. When we suffer, the brain adapts. When we heal, the brain adapts. Both breaking and healing are biological processes. To understand this deeply, imagine the brain as a vast landscape of pathways. Every thought, every emotion, every behavior, every memory is like a trail through a forest. The more a trail is used, the deeper and clearer it becomes. The less a trail is traveled, the more it fades, slowly becoming overgrown. Trauma creates deep trails. Paths of fear, paths of hypervigilance, paths of avoidance, paths of self-blame, paths of emotional shutdown. These trails form automatically because the brain prioritizes survival over comfort. But new paths can be formed. Paths of safety, paths of calm, paths of trust, paths of self-compassion, paths of resilience, paths of connection. These pathways develop slowly through repeated experiences of safety and regulation. Relax your shoulders again, letting the tension fall. This is the softness that helps the nervous system relearn trust. Neuroplasticity works through three primary mechanisms. 1. Repetition. The more often we engage in a new behavior, emotion, or thought pattern, the more the brain strengthens that pathway. Healing requires practice, breathing, grounding, expressing, connecting, not perfection. 2. Attention. Where our attention goes, neural energy flows. If we constantly focus on threat, the brain strengthens pathways of fear. If we learn to bring attention to safety, gratitude, compassion, or calm moments, even for seconds, the brain begins to carve new pathways. 3. Emotion. Emotions act like neural amplifiers. Experiences filled with strong emotion, fear, joy, relief, connection, create deeper pathways. This is why healing moments, even small ones, can have profound impact. Neuroplasticity also explains why healing can feel slow. Old pathways do not disappear immediately. They weaken gradually. New pathways grow alongside them, becoming stronger with time, repetition, and support. This is why healing requires patience. It is not that the brain resists change. It is that deep pathways formed from pain must be gently replaced, not forced away. Take another breath, feeling the rise and fall without effort. These moments of presence signal safety to the nervous system, reinforcing new pathways. The brain's capacity to heal is influenced by several key experiences. Safety. When the nervous system feels safe, the prefrontal cortex becomes active, allowing new learning. Safety can come from a person, a place, a sound, a breath, or even a memory. Connection. Relationships shape the brain. A caring friend, a supportive partner, a compassionate therapist. Even one stable connection can reshape neural pathways previously formed by fear. Awareness. When we observe our patterns without judgment, the brain begins to reorganize. Self-awareness lights up neural circuits that help regulate emotion. Expression. Talking, writing, crying, creating these allow trapped experiences to move and transform. Movement. The body plays a crucial role. Walking, stretching, breathing deeply, these shift the nervous system and create openings for neural change. Rest. Healing requires downtime. Sleep rewires the brain. Rest allows integration. Choice. Every small choice to be kinder, to pause, to breathe, to reach out shapes the neural landscape. Healing is not a sudden transformation. It is the accumulation of small shifts, moments of safety, moments of connection, moments of insight, moments of compassion. These moments slowly rewire the brain. The brain's plasticity is why people can heal from trauma decades after it happened. It is why emotional patterns learned in childhood can be unlearned in adulthood. It is why fear can soften. It is why numbness can thaw. It is why shame can dissolve. It is why resilience can grow. Gently relax your breath, letting the exhale extend slightly. This mirrors the slow extension of new neural pathways growing from moments of calm. Neuroplasticity also explains why self-compassion is powerful. When we speak kindly to ourselves, the brain lights up in areas associated with safety and connection. This softens the amygdala, strengthens the prefrontal cortex, reduces internal conflict, creates new emotional pathways. Even imagining a supportive person activates similar neural circuits to actually being with them. The brain uses memory and imagination as tools for healing. The story of renewal is a biological story. It is the brain's willingness to change, the body's ability to settle, the heart's capacity to reopen. But this renewal is guided by emotion. Emotion is not a problem. Emotion is the pathway. Emotion is the guide. Emotion is the messenger that leads us toward integration. To understand the next phase of healing, we move now into the heart of what makes us human, the emotional world. Not as something to fear, suppress, or endure, but as something sacred, something essential, something that carries the key to recovery. The role of emotion. Emotion is one of the oldest languages the human body speaks. Older than words, older than thought, older than memory. Emotion existed long before the human mind learned to narrate, interpret, or understand. It pulses through every living creature as a guide, a signal, a messenger. And yet, in modern life, emotion has become misunderstood, feared, suppressed, ignored, or labeled as weakness. To heal, we must return to the truth of emotion. Emotion is not the enemy. Emotion is the gateway. Emotion is the compass pointing us toward what needs attention. And when we break, emotion is not what harms us. It is what we have been unable to feel safely. Take a gentle breath in, letting it expand softly, and let the exhale fall like a slow release. This simple awareness is where emotional understanding begins. Emotion is energy and motion sensations moving through the body, shaped by experiences, expressed through the nervous system. Every emotion has a purpose. Every emotion carries intelligence. Fear warns. Anger protects. Sadness releases. Joy connects. Shame alerts us to disconnection. Love draws us closer. Grief honors what matters. Even numbness communicates. It tells us the load is too heavy. But when we are taught to bury emotion, the natural flow becomes disrupted. This is where emotional fracture begins. Not in the feeling itself, but in the blocking of it. Children feel emotions fully, openly, without filter. A child's cry is a pure expression of need. A child's anger is a natural expression of frustration. A child's sadness is a simple request for comfort. But as children grow, they learn often silently which emotions are acceptable and which must be hidden. Stop crying. Calm down. Don't be angry. You're too sensitive. You're being dramatic. I don't have time for this. These messages shape emotional expression for decades. Not because the child chooses, but because the nervous system adapts to preserve connection. When expressing emotion leads to disconnection, the child suppresses the emotion to maintain attachment. Not feeling becomes a strategy for staying loved. Relax your shoulders again, letting the muscles soften. This gentle release mirrors the softening required to feel emotions safely. As adults, many of us inherit these patterns. We fear the intensity of emotion because we were never taught how to sit with it. We fear anger because we saw it used destructively. We fear sadness because we believe it is weakness. We fear vulnerability because we learned it leads to harm. We fear joy because we expect it to vanish. We fear love because we fear loss. We fear our own inner world because, at some point, it was too much to bear alone. But emotion is not the problem. Emotion is the solution. The danger lies not in feeling, but in not feeling. When emotions are blocked, several things happen. 1. They get stored in the body. Tension, headaches, fatigue, tightness in the chest. These are unexpressed emotions living in physical form. 2. They get stored in behavior. Avoidance, defensiveness, anger outbursts, withdrawal. These are emotional patterns seeking release. 3. They get stored in beliefs. I'm not enough. I'm too much. I can't trust anyone. I don't deserve love. These beliefs often arise from suppressed emotional experiences. 4. They get stored in relationships. Unfelt emotions distort communication. They create conflict, misunderstanding, or distance. But when we allow emotion to be felt gently, safely, with compassion, the nervous system begins to reorganize. Emotion moves. It completes its cycle. It transforms. Take a slow breath, letting the inhale rise effortlessly and the exhale soften the ribs. This awareness reflects the calm container emotion needs. Each emotion has a natural rhythm. Fear rises quickly to alert us to danger, but it also subsides quickly when safety is restored unless the danger lives in memory, not the present. Anger surges to protect boundaries. When felt and expressed safely, it restores autonomy. When suppressed, it becomes self-criticism or resentment. Sadness slows the body, preparing us for rest, reflection, or letting go. When allowed, sadness softens the heart. When blocked, it becomes numbness or fatigue. Grief honors the loss of what mattered, giving depth and meaning to love. Unfelt, grief becomes a heaviness that lingers without name. Joy expands the nervous system, strengthening connection and safety. But joy requires vulnerability, the willingness to be open. Shame signals the need for reconnection, not punishment. It asks for understanding, not silence. Love is the most regulating emotion of all. It stabilizes the heart, calms the amygdala, and deepens the roots of safety. Emotions are not random. They are biological, evolutionary, and deeply intelligent. The nervous system is designed to process emotion through sensation, movement, breath, expression, connection. When any of these channels are blocked, the emotion becomes stuck, not gone stuck. And stuck emotion becomes suffering. Relax the jaw if you can. So much emotion, especially anger and fear, tends to settle there. Healing requires learning to feel again. But not all at once, not forcibly, not without support. Healing begins with slow permission. Permission to notice, permission to name, permission to feel a small amount at a time. Permission to express in safe environments. Permission to ask for support. Permission to be human. When we soften into emotion with awareness, the nervous system begins to shift. The amygdala quiets. The prefrontal cortex strengthens, the heart rate stabilizes, the breath deepens, the body relaxes, the story changes. Emotion, once feared as dangerous, becomes recognized as the guide, as the truth teller, as the messenger that leads us back to ourselves. But emotion alone does not explain the full journey of healing. Humans have always sought more than psychological insight. Across cultures and centuries, people have turned to ritual, community, symbolism, and ancient practices to mend the inner world. To understand how healing transcends the individual, how collective wisdom shapes recovery, we now step into a wider landscape. A landscape of history, culture, tradition, and the timeless human search for repair. Ancient healing traditions, long before psychology, long before neuroscience, long before trauma had a name. Human beings understood suffering. They felt it in their bones, their breath, their dreams, their relationships, their rituals. Across thousands of years, cultures around the world developed their own ways of healing, not through clinical theory, but through collective wisdom, intuition, and deep attunement to the human spirit. These ancient traditions are not primitive. They are profound. They reveal truths that modern science is only now rediscovering. Truths about connection, rhythm, breath, meaning, story, and the nervous system. Truths about how humans break. Truths about how humans heal. Take a slow, easy breath in and let the exhale lengthen gently. This simple act connects you to something older than memory, the universal breath that has always marked the beginning of healing. Ancient healing traditions begin with something modern life often forgets. Healing is communal. Healing is rhythmic. Healing is embodied. Healing is symbolic. Healing is sacred. In many early cultures, suffering was not seen as a personal failure. It was understood as a disruption in the body, the spirit, the community, or the balance of life. And healing was the restoration of harmony. One of the oldest healing methods was ritual. Ritual created structure around pain. It turned emotional chaos into meaningful action. It gave shape to the invisible. It offered a safe container for grief, fear, and transformation. In ancient societies, fire symbolized purification. Water symbolized renewal. Earth symbolized grounding. Air symbolized clarity. Light symbolized insight. Darkness symbolized mystery and rebirth. People gathered around flames, spoke prayers into rivers, buried objects as symbols of letting go, breathed deeply in the morning air, or sat in silence beneath the stars to reconnect with something larger than themselves. These rituals calmed the nervous system long before the concept existed. They created predictability in moments of loss. They restored belonging in moments of isolation. They reconnected the individual to the collective. Relax your shoulders gently. Let awareness settle. This mirrors the grounding found across traditions worldwide. Another ancient form of healing was community gathering. Humans sat together in circles, not rows, not lines, but circles. Circles symbolize equality, shared humanity, shared breath, shared emotion. In these circles, people told stories. Stories of loss, stories of fear, stories of courage, stories of transformation. Storytelling bonded the group and regulated the nervous system. Today we know that being witnessed reduces cortisol, activates oxytocin, and restores emotional balance. Ancient cultures intuitively understood this. They created public spaces where emotion could be held collectively. Many cultures also practiced drumming, chanting, and rhythmic movement. These were not entertainment. They were medicine. Rhythm synchronizes heartbeats. It calms the amygdala. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It induces trance states that allow processing and integration. The human body responds instinctively to rhythm. Footsteps, heartbeats, waves, wind, breath. Rhythm is regulation. Rhythm is safety. Rhythm is one of the oldest forms of healing. Take another gentle breath and feel the natural rhythm of the inhale and exhale. This pulse of breath is itself an ancient practice. In regions around the world, healing took different forms but served similar purposes. In indigenous cultures, healing involved the land, the ancestors, the elements. People were guided to reconnect with nature, to walk barefoot, to listen to the wind, to observe animals, to understand the seasons. Nature was a teacher. Stillness was medicine. In African traditions, healing often involved drumming, dance, communal celebration, and spiritual cleansing. Pain was transformed through expression, movement, and rhythm. In East Asian traditions, healing was approached through energy, movement, and balance. Practices like meditation, breathing, Tai Chi, and Qigong recognized the deep link between mind, body, and breath. The goal was harmony, not perfection. In South Asian traditions, healing involved contemplation, mantra, breathwork, and rituals that brought the mind back into alignment with the body. Yoga was originally created not as exercise, but as a psychological practice to regulate the nervous system and integrate emotion. In ancient Middle Eastern and Mediterranean cultures, healing involved poetry, philosophy, music, communal mourning, and hospitality. The home was a healing space. The table was a gathering ground. Food and conversation were medicine. In European shamanic traditions, healing involved symbolism, journeying, herbal blends, and deep listening. Shamans did not fix people. They guided them back to themselves. Across all these traditions, one theme appears again and again. Healing is reconnection. Reconnection to the self. Reconnection to others. Reconnection to the body. Reconnection to nature. Reconnection to meaning. Reconnection to something larger, whether spirit, ancestors, community, or the cycles of the earth. In modern life, many of these ancient practices have been forgotten. We have gained technology, but lost ritual. We have gained convenience, but lost connection. We have gained productivity, but lost presence. We have gained information, but lost wisdom. Yet the human body remembers. The human psyche remembers. Somewhere deep inside, the nervous system still responds to ancient cues. Firelight, water sounds, warmth, touch, rhythm, stillness, community, story, movement, symbolism, nature, breath. These experiences regulate us, even when we do not consciously understand why. Take a slow breath, allowing the air to ground you gently. This is the same breath humans used thousands of years ago in healing rituals. Healing traditions also recognized something profound. Breaking is part of the human journey. Pain is not the end of the story. Pain is the threshold, the doorway, the initiation into growth. In many cultures, suffering was seen not as failure, but as transformation, a rite of passage, a deepening, a call to shed old identities and become something new. In this way, ancient healing traditions mirror the modern understanding of post-traumatic growth. The idea that growth often emerges from adversity, that meaning can arise from suffering, that identity can evolve through the process of repair. Ancient cultures understood something modern life often forgets. Healing is not a return to who we were. Healing is becoming who we are meant to be. And so, as we move into the next chapter, we step into the culmination of this journey. The integration, the emergence, the honest, gentle process of becoming whole again. Becoming whole again. Healing is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of a new one. Not a return to innocence, but a return to integrity. Not a return to the person you were before the pain, but the emergence of someone deeper, wiser, more grounded, more real. Becoming whole again is not about erasing the fractures. It is about integrating them, honoring them, transforming them into part of the architecture of your life. Take a slow, gentle breath in and let the exhale fall softly. This quiet awareness reflects the steady, patient rhythm of integration. Wholeness is often misunderstood. People imagine it means perfection, resolution, the absence of struggle. But true wholeness is the opposite. Wholeness includes everything: the light and the shadow, the joy and the grief, the fear and the courage, the wound and the wisdom. Wholeness does not mean nothing is broken. It means nothing is hidden. Nothing is exiled. Nothing is abandoned within yourself. We become whole not by avoiding our pain, but by welcoming home the parts of us we learned to fear or suppress. The child who was scared, the teen who was overwhelmed, the adult who felt alone, the protector who learned to numb, the survivor who carried everything quietly. Integration is the gentle reunion of these parts, a recognition that each one did their best. Each one adapted for survival. Each one deserves compassion, not judgment. Relax your shoulders slightly. Feel gravity hold them. This small act mirrors the surrender required for wholeness, the letting go of internal tension. Wholeness involves several key processes, each unfolding slowly, naturally, at the pace your nervous system allows. 1. Reclaiming the self. Healing involves remembering that you are more than your wounds. You are more than your coping strategies. You are more than your past. You are a whole being, capable of connection, emotion, love, and meaning. The self that trauma obscured is still there, waiting, patient, enduring. 2. Integrating emotion. Wholeness means allowing emotion to flow, to be felt without fear. Sadness is allowed. Anger is allowed. Joy is allowed. Fear is allowed. Emotion becomes a visitor, not an enemy. 3. Strengthening boundaries. Healing teaches the difference between walls and boundaries. Walls block connection. Boundaries protect it. Wholeness involves learning when to say no, when to say yes, and when to walk away. It is the art of honoring your own needs without shutting others out. 4. Reconnecting to the body. Trauma often disconnects the mind from the body. Becoming whole means coming back home to breath, sensation, movement, rest. It means listening to the body's signals and responding with care. 5. Rewriting beliefs. Shame, fear, and trauma create beliefs that limit us. Healing involves questioning these beliefs. Is this truly who I am? Or is this who I became to survive? Integration involves choosing beliefs rooted in compassion, not fear. 6. Rebuilding trust. Trust in others. Trust in life. Trust in yourself. This trust grows not from perfection, but from experienced moments of safety, presence, honesty, and connection. 7. Creating meaning. The final step of healing is meaning-making, transforming pain into insight, resilience, purpose. Your experiences become part of your story, not chains that bind you. Meaning does not erase suffering, but it illuminates it. Take another slow breath, letting the inhale expand gently and the exhale soften. This steady rhythm is the nervous system's quiet movement toward wholeness. Becoming whole again does not happen in dramatic epiphanies. It happens in moments. Small, subtle, ordinary moments. A morning when you wake and feel calm. A conversation where you speak honestly. A boundary you set without guilt. A night when sleep comes easily. A tear that falls without fear. A smile that feels genuine. A moment of stillness where you feel safe in your own presence. Healing is less a destination and more a direction, a way of living. A gradual leaning toward truth. A gentle opening to life. There will still be difficult days. Healing does not eliminate hardship. It changes your relationship to it. Instead of collapsing, you breathe. Instead of numbing, you feel. Instead of hiding, you reach out. Instead of shaming yourself, you soften. This is wholeness, not the absence of pain, but the presence of compassion. Relax your breath again, letting it flow with ease. This simple rhythm has followed you through this entire journey, reminding you that even in pain, even in uncertainty, life continues, breath continues, possibility continues. Wholeness also involves reconnecting with the future self, the version of you that emerges after healing, shaped not by trauma, but by growth. This future self is not perfect, but they are authentic, grounded, honest, courageous, open. They carry their history with dignity, not shame. They love more deeply because they know the cost of disconnection. They speak more truthfully because they know the harm of silence. They live with more intention because they know the fragility of life. Becoming whole again means becoming someone who can hold both the beauty and the pain of being alive. And this journey, this entire exploration of why we break and how we heal, leads to one profound truth. Brokenness is not the end. It is the doorway. Healing is not a return. It is an evolution. You are not what happened to you. You are what you choose to become through it. Let a final slow breath rise and fall. Feel its softness. Feel its clarity. Feel the quiet resilience woven into its rhythm. This is the breath of wholeness. This is the breath of becoming. This is the breath of a story still unfolding, a story shaped by pain, transformed by healing, and illuminated by the strength that remains within you. You are becoming whole again.